Welcome to Lucid Work Series, Connected Experiences with me, Jess Jurva, Chief Customer Officer. Our episodes explore the human side of connected experiences, what having a connected experience means, and how to build more connected experiences with the world around us. Today, I'm joined by two wonderful women that I'm proud to call friends and mentors. Kate Purmal, former CEO and technology executive, board director, business advisor, executive coach, and author. And Lee Epting, former technology executive, board advisor, executive coach, and lecturer. Welcome to you both.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jess.
Great to see you.
Our theme in this session today is going to be an exploration and a discussion around connection to self. So to kick us off, I'd love for each of you to share how you would describe yourself. So Kate, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, I am the proud mother of two adult children who are out on their own and working. And I am the wife of a yacht, which creates tremendous adventure in my life. I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I love hiking and biking and running, mountain biking and sailing. Of course, we do a lot of that. And I was new to sailing when I met my husband 4 years ago. And I still can barely make my way around the boat, but that's why he's the yacht captain.
That's awesome.
He's the boss on the water. I'm the boss on the land, and that's how we work it out.
I love that.
And I am an author, and I am a lecturer at business school, and I'm really passionate about equity and inclusion in business. And that has focused originally on women and now more broadly to people in the out group, as we call it, people of color, different cultural backgrounds, sexual identities, etc. And I know that my children are biracial. They identify as Black, and they're my biological children. And so I have a very unique perspective on race that I bring to just about everything. And it's been a really rich, rewarding, and challenging opportunity.
Yeah. Lee, how about you?
So I'm a wife. I've been married 28 years to my husband. He is originally born and raised in Italy. And we have one son. His name is Luca, and he is now a sophomore in college. We are right now in the midst of another international move. Most of my career took us around the world as a former technology executive. And recently, we are moving now from the Gulf Coast of Florida to Italy full time. Our son will be here in the US, so we'll be obviously traveling back pretty often. I am certainly passionate about technology. I spent my whole career there, but I also am very passionate, having worked in some of the largest tech companies in the world, around the advancement of women in the corporate domain. And I committed a lot of my personal time during my executive career to supporting women in their growth. But now I've taken a completely different turn, and Kate and I have come together and are working now on some incredible programs that I know we're going to talk more about in this podcast that are really going to help and are helping women as well as men elevate their presence in the corporate environment. So that's a passion for me. On the other personal side, I'm passionate about animals. I'm an outdoor person, pretty athletic myself, and competitive. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you both. So when we first started talking about you doing this podcast with me, and we talked about connected experiences, what first came to your mind when you heard those terms, connected experiences?
Yeah, we actually, all of our work lives in the context of connection, right? Because we are human beings in a connected environment full of relationships that are anything on the spectrum from rich and rewarding to challenging and triggering, right? And that's true at work, it's true at home, it's true everywhere. And so what we know to be true is that the relationships we have with others and the connections we have with others and the quality of that, as well as the relationship and connection we have with ourselves, really makes a huge difference in terms of your ability to be present and show up and contribute and lead and influence and really leave a legacy as a human being.
Yeah. Anything to add there, Lee, for you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we certainly know through the work we're doing is this community aspect of what we do is so important. And the primary driver for that, and what we hear from our clients, is that they recognize that they're not the only one that is struggling. And it's just that simple acknowledgement that then gets them onto this journey for transformation.
Yeah. So you both are working on a pretty big initiative and have been for the last year. One of those things is culminating in your book launch, October 19th. So your new book called Composure, The Art of Executive Presence. There you go, there it is. And you also have workshops and things like that that you run. Can you tell us more about these initiatives and what it means to you?
Yeah, we started working in this area of stepping into full leadership and leadership potential. And what we identified when we started to do this was that the biggest challenge or barrier for many people to really show up and fully inhabit their full potential is our internal limitations that we tend to put in the category of imposter syndrome. So sensitivity to rejection and criticism, self-doubt or lack of confidence, feeling like you don't deserve your success or you're a fraud, perfectionism that has you overwork and over prepare and really burns up a bunch of your energy on things that might not matter. It's those types of things that we've identified that are barriers. And so that's what we set out to do, is actually find a way through the book and the work that we do to overcome those barriers. And as you do so internally from the inside out, not just, lean in and speak up and self-promote, but really, how do you change your relationship with yourself so that you don't step into situations feeling those things? And then when you do that, it naturally unlocks what we call executive presence, which is this quality in leaders that that you see, who are grace under pressure, who are really these forces, and they're credible and they're inspiring. And how do we unlock that? And that's the intersection we've been working on.
Yeah, we started out before Kate got to writing the book and really putting it all together. We formulated a 12-week program, which we've been running for now over a year and a half, which is having tremendous results. And it really, I'll shamelessly also promote the workbook we've done. I don't know if you can see that there, but
Yep.
it is it is a companion workbook to the book, and the whole premise on this is that you can work through in these stages that we take our clients through to breaking through those behaviors that Kate talked about, and really embracing what we would term executive presence. Which is everything from composure, grace under pressure and all that, but also it's about confidence. It's about, having credibility when you walk in the room and being able to communicate clearly. So that's really the whole driver. And as I mentioned, the program is having tremendous results. And then, of course, it gave us a lot of content and food for thought as then we set off on the journey for doing the book.
Yeah. So Kate, why the book? Why now?
Yeah, the book is really the culmination of everything we learned through this process of doing live programs with hundreds of executives. And what we wanted to do is make it fully accessible to everybody. We wanted to democratize this content and these foundational premises that we developed. And we felt a book was the best way to do that, because we can get a book in just about everybody's hands. And the book in combination with the workbook means that if you've got, $20 to spend, you can get, or $10 to spend, you can get that. And so we really wanted that to be broadly available. And what we know is that during this last year and a half, with so much trauma happening because of COVID, because of racial injustice, because of being isolated, because of all of these things, our relationship with work has been traumatized, that we are in this unique time. It just so happens that our work is a salve, if you will, to these societal woes that are showing up particularly strongly at the intersection of work and human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big revelation for us, Jess, just in terms of recognizing that the work we're doing is actually having and helping people to not only become aware of the feelings they're having, but also putting them onto a path of how they can break through those behaviors that they have. And given the timing, as Kate mentioned, it really couldn't have come at a better time, because we have people reaching out for assistance, and we were able to give them this content and really see it in real time, how it can impact them.
Right, right. So let's talk about the title. So Composure.
Yes.
How did you get to that title and that name? Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I did throughout the writing of the book is I would set out on these walks when I was sort of stuck, and I listened to Krista Tippett's On Being podcast, and I would literally scroll through on my phone and just stab at one of them, and whatever came up I'd listen to. I didn't even, unless I'd listened to it before, then I'd pick another one. And I set out to write to figure out the title of the book. We didn't have a title yet. The book was pretty much completely written, but we had no title. And I came up with her interview with Mary Catherine Bateson, who was talking about this pivotal point in history in the 1970s, where women who had previously given up higher education or employment outside the home to start families were going back to school, back to the workplace, and for the first time trying to combine family life with an active career and finding it difficult. They were talking about juggling. By the way, I'm reading from the book, which is to me a terribly anxiety-producing metaphor. This sentence resonated with me and Lee deeply, because in our practice, what we do is we work with people, ambitious and high-performing people, who feel like they've lost control of their lives. And they're using words like juggle, struggle, anxious. And we really wanted to find a way to bring them to a different state. And that is this aspirational state of composure. I mean, who doesn't want to feel composed and have grace under pressure? So basically, that's how we came up with the title. I like to think of men and women as artists. This is quoting Bateson, who of their own lives working with what comes to hand through accident or talent to compose and recompose a pattern in time that expresses who they are and what they believe in, making meaning even as they are studying and working and raising children, creating and recreating themselves. So that was the origin of the book, and we just felt like it encompassed everything that we're trying to culminate through our work, getting people into a state of composure.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, when you look at the many connections that you've made over the course of both of your lives and careers, some have been sustained, others not. A great example of relationships or connections that have sustained is the three of us. All of us have known each other collectively for 24 years and met under the same company. So how the connections that you make and the connected experiences that you have, why are they important to you?
Well, it's so amazing that we know we are all the product of a community, right? We have this broad community. And as Lee said, and yet when we're struggling, we so often feel alone. One of the things that we hear over and over again in the work that we do is when we introduce the concept of imposter syndrome and how people talk about how it affects them, what happens is they reveal how it impacts them at work, and others get to hear that the people around them are profoundly affected by these feelings because it's something that we hide. And that moment of connection is so meaningful because it makes them feel as though they're not alone and that they don't need to hide this. They can actually sort of come to the surface, come out with it, and have it be something where they can provide mutual support. And that is just this little microcosm. Below that lives our entire community of family and friends and former work colleagues who we may not have talked to for 20 years, but are still there and present and interested in us and wanting to hear from us, and vice versa. And that's a really powerful web of support. And so for me, connectedness means being able to tap into and or feel that web of support so that we don't feel alone.
Yeah. Yeah. What about for you, Lee?
Well, you know, I believe that the network that we build in our life it's forever. And so even if we don't see people for many, many years, inadvertently, the experience that we had are still with us and those people are still with us. And then sometimes, they just present themselves to you in the physical form on occasion. And I know, Jess, with you and I, we had many years where we were sort of not connected. And then we reconnected when I was in London in person.
Yeah.
And that was just fabulous. And you were, getting ready to be married, and I had the opportunity to meet your wife. And, it was just such a beautiful moment. I have so many beautiful moments in my life history like this. And I have just recently, just reminds me, the other week I was contacted by a former person that used to be my administrator at one of my roles. And she always had this aspiration to be, she didn't want to just do admin work. She wanted to be in technology. So I set it up in a way that, yes, she was my administrator, but she also started doing quality assurance work on some new products we were delivering. And I gave her targets in her whole sort of MBO package that were related to product. And I'm really proud to say that when she contacted me this time, she was calling me because she wants some assistance. She's going to potentially make a big move because she is now working smack in the middle of technology for some of the biggest companies in the world as a product person. And so it just reminded me that, everything we do, the experiences that we have, the journeys that we're on, they are collective and they do and will present themselves. And it reminds me as well about this whole concept of paying it forward, and how important paying it forward is. I know for Kate and I've known Kate since the early 90s when she hired me to Palm Computing and was my boss. And obviously our careers went then in different directions, and there was many years as well when we weren't connected, but we were always connected somehow. And I knew that because she hired me when I was a non-technologist to come in and do a role that involved, technology I wasn't familiar with. She gave me and threw me that line, which then put me on the pathway to, doing the things that I really am quite passionate about. And I feel like I like to pay that forward with other people. Hence the reason why I always made it my objective when someone said, well, I don't just want to do this, I want to do something else. It's like, well, then clear the path and make it happen.
Yes, same here. And Kate's been influential for me in that way as well. So Kate, as we prepared for this session, you spoke a little bit about oftentimes, and you both have just referenced this, about how you make those connections, but then sometimes become disconnected with those lifetime relationships. And you mentioned like, that's okay. And there's all this downward pressure for it not to be okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why it's okay?
Yeah, I think we all admire those quintessential networkers that are always in connection with everybody. But that's not me. and
that's not me either.
Not most of us. And so those of us who aren't that way often feel uncomfortable reaching out to reconnect with someone, especially above us, who we've lost connection with because we believe in some weird way that it was our responsibility to stay connected. What I know from my personal experience is that as I've grown in my career, as I've become a CEO, I've joined boards of directors, I'm writing this book, we're doing this public work. When people reach out to me who I have not connected with in years, it's a gift to me. And I receive it as such. And it's inspiring to me that they remember me and flattering that they want to reach out to me. And it is an opportunity they're gifting me to renew a connection that had meaning before. And so I just like to encourage everybody to not worry about how long it's been and not worry about the reason. I'm happy to have people reach out to me to ask for mentorship, advice, and support. That's fine. You don't have to have, sent me Christmas cards every year to do that.
Yeah, good. So true. Yeah, it's not, it really isn't critical that you're in contact with everyone just for the purposes, when you want to reach out, as Kate said, oftentimes it is considered a gift. I think we love when people come back into our lives and see what we're doing now and say, hey, I have this issue, I'd like to talk to you about it. It's such an opportunity for us to give and have that person receive, and at the same time we feel like we're really gaining something in that regard as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So when we talk about connection and connection to yourself and connection to those around you, how do you know when you're disconnected with your own self? Like when you're in a scenario, when you feel triggered, how do you connect to what's happening and coming through for you in that moment and connect to that?
So a big premise of our work is a concept of internal versus external motivation. And so the idea is, here we are, human beings in settings, whether it's in your personal life or in business, where you're dealing with other human beings and dynamics that can be difficult and triggering. And when that happens, it affects us, right? It affects how present we are. Most of us, almost all of us, have some safety patterning in that has us on high alert, looking for danger, because that's what we as human beings do. And it actually doesn't take a lot in many business settings to trigger that antenna to go flying up. So it can be as simple as one of our clients who had just finished presenting her annual plan for the next year. And the executive in the room, the senior most executive, said, "This is really great, and I'm not sure you're thinking big enough." And that was taken in as criticism and triggered her. And it basically put her into fight or flight mode, in which you lose all ability to reason, you lose all of your resourcefulness, and all you can basically do is just sort of freeze and try to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. So and that is a state of disconnection from self, because your brain is in fear, fight or flight. It's trying to get out of it. And meanwhile, your body's still in the room, right? So the most important thing is to do is to get yourself back in your body. And we recommend people do something that we call finding your butt, which is like, if you're sitting in a chair, just notice the weight of your body in the chair. Like, oh, I'm actually sitting here. Pay attention to your breathing. You can rub your two fingers together. You can, whatever it takes to get your mind out of this panic mode to fight, to get back in the body and allow yourself to settle in. And that's really the first and most critical step to remaining connected to yourself. And usually we recommend people buy themselves time to do that. It's not easy to do that when you're trying at the same time to respond to whatever was said.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the best ways to do that, that's actually value add for everybody, is to simply repeat what you heard and make sure you got it right. Or could you tell me more? So you're just buying yourself a little bit of time to get your breathing back to normal, to try to, get the red out of your face and to feel yourself in the chair. So she could have said, it didn't happen, but she could have said, that's so interesting. We worked really hard on this presentation. I'd like to hear more about why it is you say we're not thinking big enough.
Yeah.
And then she doesn't even have to respond. No defensiveness. So that's what we talk about in terms of being connected to self, is in your body, calm, composed, so that you can be curious, thoughtful, and resourceful in however you react.
Yeah. And a big part of that as well is the work we do on personal boundaries. So, when we are reactive, when we are triggered, as Kate was talking about, and we have an overreaction to something that might be considered relatively small in the grander scheme of things, this opportunity to put up your personal boundaries. And we do that through really using physical exercise to establish boundaries so that we can get some space between us and those things out there that inadvertently are going to trigger us.
Right.
And it allows you then to become more curious, like Kate said, and say, I'm kind of interested in what you were thinking about when you said think bigger. In fact, in that particular opportunity, it could have been an invitation for this individual to get more money and more budget to do bigger exercises, right? But because of how she showed up without the boundary and without getting into herself and sort of anchoring herself, she was unable to walk away. And that's the cost for people that aren't able to have this kind of sense of self that we're talking about and that we work on through our programs.
Yeah. And Lee, you bring up a great topic around boundaries. And I believe it's one of the chapters in the book. I think it's called Badass Boundaries, right? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so badass boundaries are critical to self-connection. So the fundamental premise behind it is You literally have a physical space around you that is a personal boundary. It's a felt sense of personal boundary. And when personal boundaries are really effective, when they're badass, they're big enough that you can keep everything out there that may or may not be safe for you. You can just keep it out there, but everything in here, inside your personal boundary, is your safe space. You don't let anything in until you're ready and able to deal with it. So when the comment comes in that you're not thinking big enough, if you have your personal boundaries up, and trust me, you're not in a meeting with your hands out, okay? If you establish them that way, you can put your hands down and still feel it. You can have that comment come in and go screeching halt at the edge of your boundary, and you can count backwards from 3 to 1 and breathe and get your butt in the seat and make sure that you're in your body, and then you can respond to it, right? That is the example of a boundary, and that's being connected to yourself. When you don't have those boundaries, you get hijacked. The comment comes in, it sends your system into high alert, and you get triggered, and you become completely unresourceful because you're in fight or flight mode and you can't think.
So as you both continue to do the work around composure and the art of executive presence, we all have been affected by the global pandemic and see each other less in person, when it comes to work engagements. How has that affected the workshops that you're leading and keeping folks engaged?
It's so funny. We are teaching a course at University of Michigan, the business school, in January, and we were just having this discussion about should you mandate people being on camera or not. And we shared with the professor we're working with our experience with our work is that what we've concluded is that this medium, Zoom meetings, has been, or virtual meetings, has been a huge blessing for us to be able to do the work, because it allows people to be present in a comfortable setting and choose how visible to be, because the work we do is pretty deep. So that's been, I think, something that's accelerated our work and made it even more accessible than it would otherwise be. And I just want to throw this out to people. We strongly believe that it's appropriate for people to choose whether they're on or off camera, and to give them other ways to participate. So a lot of times in our sessions, half of the people will be off camera, but they'll be using reactions like hearts or clapping hands, or they'll be talking in chat to connect, even though they're not visibly present. But we just think Zoom is so invasive, or it can be, that we feel it's really important to leave people control over how much that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, Kate, that we we find is that when you go into a physical meeting, you're not generally looking at everyone's face frontal in front of you, right? You're normally in an oblong table or something like that, so you're only got your peripheral vision and who's sort of across from you. And this medium that we're using brings everyone faces frontal, and especially for our clients who are BIPOC, they find it overwhelming because it exacerbates the fact that they are one of the onlys in the room. And that can be very triggering for them. So again, we advocate for, if you don't feel comfortable being on camera, to turn the camera off. The other thing that came up in the context of the discussion for the course that Kate and I are teaching at the Ross Business School in January is, whether we should allow the computers in there, in the classroom, and whether we should mandate that they close their laptops. And again, on the flip side of that is, well, okay, but people utilize that for capturing their thoughts, their feelings, and whatever they're doing. And, to have the freedom to allow them to step in and decide how they want to do that. May some portion of them probably be on social media, or doing other things, or multitasking, as we call it, potentially, but then of course that's their loss, right?
Got it. So then my last question for both of you, and you both have referenced sort of some techniques and things that you recommend and share with other folks in your program, but what tools or methods do you use to stay connected to yourself? And when you're in a moment, to reconnect there, what are the things that you do and that you would recommend to others?
Well, the big irony is one of the most powerful tools to connect to yourself is to disconnect and
Mm,
observe yourself from the outside for a moment, right? And then reconnect in. So, for example, the woman that we talked about who had the feedback that she wasn't thinking big enough, when I asked her to put herself in that situation and disconnect out of herself and look at the situation like you're on a surveillance camera, right?
yeah,
You're
yeah.
actually surveilling the situation. You're observing it from up here, including watching yourself. Maybe you're watching the top of your head. What do you notice about the situation when you're out here? Because things are a lot clearer when you're out here than when you're in here sometimes. And so she was able to notice that the tone of that comment wasn't critical. It actually was, it was in service of the business. It was in service of her work to have more impact or influence. And she noticed that she was really triggered. And then she could say from here, what might have been a different response that would have been more beneficial. And she could say, well, if I could have stayed not triggered and stayed present enough to ask for more information, it would have been extremely helpful. And then she's able to come back into her body and then replay the situation like that. So the idea of being able to move out and get some insight and perspective and then move back in is one really important way to stay connected.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, another one that we often use with our clients, and I know Kate and I use this as well, is this bilateral stimulation.
Mhm.
There's a lot of talk now about tapping and such, but Kate and Joshua and I have been using this technique now for the last year and a half with our clients, which is really, this tapping very slowly on each arm. And Kate, it's really about, your brain will overcompensate when you're in a triggered situation where one side of your brain will be more dominant than the other. And just this small action like this will get you more equal in terms of your brain function. For me, additionally, I think the breathing work that we utilize is very useful. And quite honestly, it's about calling in sort of the guides, as Kate and I like to talk about, but it's really just a higher source and a higher knowing of, letting things unfold as they're meant to unfold
Mhm.
and not to try to force outcomes. I think that's the benefit of the journeys that both Kate and I have had, as well as what we've been doing over the last, year and a half here now, is really trusting in the process and
Yeah.
knowing that if you're doing good work,
Mhm.
and your work is focused on in service of other people, a lot of good is going to come out of that.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that now, especially with next week's launch of the book and just the early reviews we're getting in, and just knowing that this work is going to impact so many people is bringing us joy.
Yeah.
And we have a chapter that Kate wrote in the book, in chapter 11, I believe, is called The Joy Factor. And
Mm.
yeah, I think everyone should read that and tune into what brings them joy.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, thank you both. I appreciate your time and joining me today on the podcast, and wish you much success in your book launch. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank
What a
you, Jess. Thanks for having us. It's always lovely to see you and spend time with you.
pleasure.
Thank you.